everybody. Welcome to Do I Need a Bigger Mouthpiece? We're really excited about this morning's episode. And notice I've said morning twice now because it is a Saturday morning where Alex and I are coming to you via Zoom.
The
And
choices we make.
yeah, exactly, to keep the content going. But we're really excited about this episode. And I'll be honest, when we first sort of put it on the books, I was a little weary of like, are we going to be able to find the things to talk about? How are we going to structure this? But Alex, for me, as I was going through the list of literature, because today we're going to be talking about books that we like in terms of just actual literature, self-help literature, theoretical literature, method books that we feel are either underrepresented or need a closer eye for us, and then also just tools, a couple cool items that we use in our day-to-day that help us as musicians and help us in terms of productivity. I was a little bit nervous at first about coming up with this list, but I had a blast actually over the last couple days compiling this and revisiting some of these books. And I don't know about you, Alex, but as I was doing this, thought to myself, man, I actually need to reread some of this stuff. It would probably be a good portion of a good use of my time to revisit some of this material myself. And so it's been an inspiration to me. What has been your experience?
Yeah, it was a similar experience for me. I think that I mean, most of us have heard from teachers this idea that the material you use is important, but it's more important how you use it than what you're using. And
Absolutely.
I buy that, but I also think that we as consumers of information trying to learn and trying to better our craft need to become discerning users. We need to be able to look at material and decide whether it's really high quality, decide if it's the right tool for what we're trying to do. Because like most published material, I say most, not all, most is high quality. But not everything is the best fit for the problem you're trying to solve. And what often happens for many of us, myself, super included in this category, and I'm sure you as well, is we go to our favorites. We go to our faithfuls. I know you have a probably at this point unhealthy relationship with the Schlossberg book, and I will tease you
At
about it
times,
forever.
definitely. Yeah, at times, definitely. I have
but
to say.
that's how this works. When you have a problem and you're playing, I'm sure one of the first things you do is you go to the Schlossberg book and you're like, well, I gotta settle down and work those basic, slow, quiet fundamentals. And hey, for my problems, that's probably right because I don't use the Schlossberg book as much as I used to, and I probably should. But we are adaptive machines that are very good at pattern recognition. And when we build patterns for ourselves that do not include variety, we fall into these traps and, small oversights in our technique become liabilities over time. It's really important to shuffle things up and to keep the diet fresh. So I think this is going to be a super useful episode. And I think that if you don't hear or know any of the books that we talk about or any of the resources that we're discussing, definitely check them out. We tried our best to curate a list that was affordable financially. There are no things on this list that are crazy expensive. And I have at least made an effort to make sure that my list contains things that are really worth your money. And I think you've done the same. So I would encourage you all to check things out if you haven't heard of them, particularly in the books to read section.
Oh yeah.
Definitely have a look. And check out the library. A lot of these will be in the library.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's going to be, I always like these sorts of episodes with other podcasts or other YouTube channels or whatever, because I generally just like suggestions. Hopefully you're listening to us because you have some faith in the information we've given to you up to this point, so you can
Boy,
sort
that's
of
a foolish
trust
choice you've made. Oh,
that is a foolish choice. I mean, it is an assumption. We'll say that much. But so take this list and sort of do a little bit of your own research. And if you pick one or two things out of this entire list of books, method books, and items, then this was a success. I have to say really quickly, Alex, as you were talking about the Schlossberg book, I was thinking to myself, and I won't name these fundamental routines, but there are a couple fundamental routines by very famous trombone players that I kind of run back to like a toxic ex-girlfriend on occasion, thinking that it's going to fix my problems. And I have such a bad history, I guess, because I spent too much time doing certain things that it just doesn't work for me anymore. And I'm like, maybe if I go back to that routine again, and then I play it for a couple days, I'm like, no, we're just not compatible.
uh,
And so it is sort of like that.
I
Um,
all of my students always talk about the fact that like I overuse this phrase. Your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness, and like It's no secret that you are a total workhorse in the practice room, but I bet that brings you to
Mm,
a place where you just keep looking under that same rock. You're like, I'm just going to work at this solution. And if it doesn't work,
oh,
Kevin, put it away.
yeah. That is so correct. If there was any one summation of my time in Boston, it was figuring out that being a hammer was not the way to go about everything. And it's like I didn't realize how close I kept that philosophy up until the move here, up through my entire 20s. But
Well, you can't be
okay.
faulted for that. A lot of people, particularly a lot of students that have really risen through the ranks by using that strategy, particularly around their peers, and it does seem to be something I run into from a lot of people from that great Lone Star State, I'll be honest. And I think it comes from just a game of numbers. There are so many great trombonists in Texas. Everybody is trying to get ahead. And when everybody has access to the same pedagogical materials, pretty much more or less, and the teaching philosophies are very similar across the board down there. And then there's an all-state system that's really paved into specific highways that you have to take. The way to differentiate yourself is hammering with hard work and slow work. And hey, there are a lot of people that don't come from that system that have to learn that skill. So, benefits on either.
Absolutely. Definitely. Most definitely. Well, why don't we jump in? Let's start with books first, if you're cool with that, Alex. And so
Totally.
I'm gonna take it away with my first book, which is called Breath by James Nestor. And this is $10 on Amazon, more or less.
Okay.
And I came across this book going into my first full summer in Boston. So I had gone through a year of my DMA, and I was actually taking some Alexander Technique lessons, and my Alexander Technique instructor turned me onto this book because, breathing is definitely a big part of Alexander Technique. And this book taught me the importance of nose breathing and the correlation between physical health and cognitive function that nose breathing brings. We, even the healthy of us, tend to be a little bit more on the mouth breathing side. We've kind of just evolved to that direction over time. And so the author describes an experiment where he plugged his nose for 10 days straight, measured all of his vitals, and then unplugged his nose and then compared. And it's funny because I actually had a similar experience because I got a septoplasty in 2015. That's where they go in and straighten the inside of your nose. And so my nose was actually plugged up for 4 days, I think. And it was the most miserable experience of my life. It was a prison outside of, I mean, it was horrible.
Yes,
So
I am one
anyway,
of those people that suffers greatly when I get a stuffed nose. I know what you're discussing. It is the worst.
yeah. So it was awful, but it changed the way that I approach my day-to-day functioning and how I respond. Particularly, he talks so much about like cortisol levels and how that raises your cortisol. And I'm just scratching the surface, and that's kind of the nature of this entire episode. So you all have to forgive us. But it revolutionized the importance that I put around nose breathing, around breathing slowly, breathing less, and the how to use that as a tool to enter into the stressful situations of recitaling, auditioning, etc. And so I cannot recommend this book just as for the aim of being a healthy person in general. Breath by James Nestor.
James Nestor's breath. Brilliant.
Excellent. What
Well,
do you got, Alex?
I can start real slow here. This is a book that is pretty well known as far as books to read as a young adult that can really add value to your life. And it is by James Clear, who is an award-winning author, and the book is called Atomic Habits. If you've not read Atomic Habits, this is probably the best-selling, self-improvement book out there right now. But James Clear talks about tiny changes that you can make in your life that will add organizational value, mental discipline, mental clarity. James Clear I think his background was in something related to government, high-end government, like FBI type stuff. But his methodology is very streamlined for an average reader. The idea is everything is short changes, tiny changes, and understanding how small changes will change your processing and over time change things. So if that isn't a recipe to describe how practicing works, I don't really know what is. Atomic Habits was a book that was recommended to me by my best friend, who is a cyber engineer. He's not in music. And I read it with the skepticism that it was going to be another self-help book. It is not like that at all. It's very short fragments that can be processed really quickly. You don't have to read it at once. You can just kind of pick at it like it's a buffet menu. And this is the book that I give many of my students first. So there's, in my studio, if you come to my house for an in-person lesson, you have to access the library. I have a wall of books, and you have to take one, you have to bring it back. And that's just like the rule in the house. So if a student comes for the first time, I make them take Atomic Habits. And I recommend to all of you that you start there. You will not regret it.
That's awesome. And you mentioned how, in the practice room, sorry, in the practice room, we make these small changes, and that's what leads to, really important growth. And so that's a huge parallel.
Yeah, I think it's a super important one. What do you got?
So next up for me, I have Peak Performance by Brad Stulberg and Steve Magnus. Now,
Yeah.
this is one that Toby turned me on to early. It's a really great book in terms of like looking at various examples of top performers in multiple areas and the characteristics they share. And one of the salient points from the entire book is that top performers have a process. They have a routine that they live by, and across the board, that's kind of what everyone has. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they all do it the exact same way all the time, but it's that they have a process that they go through. A couple of the and that they're persistent with it. And that's really the most important takeaway, I think. A couple of the most important points for me were there was a story in there about multitasking. They interviewed a guy who is this incredibly successful executive. And when they interviewed him, he had nothing else going on in the room. And this is a guy that had a lot of decisions to make, a lot of things going on. And they made a special point to note that when he was talking to them, he was talking to them. There was nothing else in the room. There was nothing else to occupy his time. There was no notifications, no notice, no dings, no anything. And my big takeaway from a practicing perspective is, when we go inside the practice room, our focus needs to be the objective at hand and what it is that we are trying to do. Another big part of the book talks about rest and its obvious effect on how we perform and how we go, the mental clarity involved with that. And so I necessarily don't do it justice. This was one of the books that, as I was looking through it and skimming through, I was like, I need to reread this. Like I love this book, but it's been a couple years and it's worth a revisit. So I definitely encourage you to check out Peak Performance by Stulberg Magnus, only $16 on Amazon.
Yeah, that one was prescient for me as well when I read it. I think there are 4 years between us in terms of our Toby education. And in that time, some things in his pedagogy grew and changed, and some things did not. And this is definitely one that did not. This was a staple of my experience as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. My second pick. Well, I'll go classic here. There's a book by an author named Eugene Herrigel called Zen and the Art of Archery. This is a book that's pretty ubiquitous in our career, but not just our career. This is a short read. It's less than 120 pages. I highly recommend it. You can get it for very cheap, $10, I think. It talks about the author's experience studying in Japan with master archery teacher. And it's, how do I describe this? This is a very difficult book to describe because you have to go in like you're panning for gold. It is not going to be apparent to you immediately as to why this is so important, but I can tell you that this is the most important book I read for about 10 years. The synthesis.
The points, just to step in really quick, it's a short book, like you said, and it's something that digests slowly over time.
Yep.
And it's like, I haven't read it now for 3 years, and there's still moments in what I'm doing where there's vivid imagery of what I was reading that flushes back or, sort of waves back over me. And I go, wow, like, okay. So anyway, sorry, that's just my
No, that's really helpful. I agree with all of that. And I don't, if I say too much, I will take away from your personal experience of reading this, but I will give you this synthesis as a jumping point. Zen and the Art of Archery is a lesson in the ideology that everything that you do in your life is a reflection of the focus of everything you do in your mind. and that the actions that you take in your life are actually taken in your mind and your body just plays them out.
Hmm.
That's the
Hmm.
best jumping point I can give you. Now go read the book.
There you go. Love that. I'm going to take a hard left turn here a
Love
little
when you do
bit.
that. What do you got?
So we speak a lot to obviously pedagogy for high school students, undergraduate students, and it's obviously applicable to the masses as well. But one of the things that we haven't talked about so much is something that's, pretty near and dear to both of us, Alex, which is the process of getting hired in higher education. And so for that
This is
reason, yeah, it does actually. There's a book called The Professor is In by Karen Kelsky. And this is the painful but ultimate companion for beginning the higher education job process. And I read this book a year ago as I was starting my last year. And up to that point, even though I wasn't really in a position to be applying for many positions, in higher ed because I wasn't done, I was still applying and I was sending cover letters and I was doing CV stuff. And this book basically just in retrospect told me that all of my materials were garbage, and I happen to agree based upon the knowledge that gets set out. This book is great about putting together your cover letters, putting together your CV, resume, statement of purpose, all of the different statements that we have to cover, DEI statements, everything is included in this, all the way through what you should expect in timelines when it comes to interviews, how to navigate phone calls / Zoom interviews, on campus interviews, how to conduct yourself when you're on campus, the things to do when you travel. I mean, it's incredibly comprehensive all the way through when you get a job offer and how to negotiate said job offer, and then how to go about building your tenure profile. So it's not written from the perspective of a musician specifically. It's more of a liberal arts method, but I think it's a must-have for any of us in that field. And it's written with a tough love voice. I'll say that much. She calls you out without even having to know you, and she's exactly right, like almost every time. So
I've heard really good things about this book. I will tell you, I have purposefully not read it yet because I want to get through all my coursework at NEC with the DMA before I finally delve into this. I am scared. I'm scared.
it's
I've heard it is a shakeup.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to use the word soul crushing, but I want to use that in as positive a light as possible, because
How is
again,
that?
it just changed. Yeah, right. It just changed, one very quick thing is, too many times, what stuck with me is too many times when we write a cover letter, it's too weepy. That is to say, it's too heartfelt. And the people reading those cover letters don't care about where your heart's at. They care about what you've done and what you plan to do. So anyway, can't
Yeah, I mean
recommend that enough.
that seems helpful.
Yeah. All right. Keep it
Uh,
on.
yeah, so I'll take a turn here too. Most people know the New York Times reporter that then went independent investigative journalist Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell is a Canadian journalist and author that is most famous for the concept of 10,000 hours of mastery. He's got a lot of books that have been really popular reads. David and Goliath being one of the big ones. He has a podcast called Revisionist History that's really interesting. He's just a very fascinating writer and thinker. But one book that he has that I particularly love is a book called Blink. And I think Blink deserves to be on this list because if you haven't read it, it might help you get in touch with your gut a little bit. And Blink is all about this idea of thin slicing. We're very good at logically thinking as humans because it's a skill we build as we grow through the school systems. Blink is the other side of the thinking coin. It's the idea to thin slice, and that is just like the thought that comes to your mind immediately when you think of something, your immediate reaction to it, your subconscious, kind of giving you instinct, trust your gut, that kind of thing. This is your body's quick subconscious pattern recognition. And being able to tap into this can be really helpful in decision making as a secondary decision making, learning to decide logically and also to thin slice things. Now, Malcolm goes at this from the argument of telling stories. And I believe there's like 12 anecdotes through the book. Each one's, 10 pages or so, maybe 15 pages. Abby Conant's story is in Blink, talking
Oh,
about
cool.
her hiring in Germany in the 80s. And it talks a little bit about, the audition bias versus a blind audition from the lens of thin slicing, which is super interesting. This book didn't directly help me, but it helped me learn to trust my instincts and verify through research that me trusting my instincts was a good idea. And
Mm.
this can be very necessary to survive this career because there are moments where you're asked to take an audition that pays $10,000 a year for the job and 100 candidates show up and they're all very qualified. And that's a ridiculous idea. That is an idea that nobody in any career would do, but your gut tells you to take the audition. And you have to be able to deal with that. You have to be able to go to sleep at night saying, God, I made a stupid decision. Why did I go for this? It's impossible. That's the logic side of the brain taking over. And unfortunately, you have to also listen to the thin slicing idea, which is that if you keep putting yourself in the game and you keep taking these risks, eventually you will win. And if you don't win in the conventional sense, you will find yourself at a place you wouldn't have gotten to otherwise, which is part of your journey and a necessary step in the process. And to that end, I think Blink is really valuable, really, really valuable.
That's that's a book that you have suggested to me before that I have yet to read. So I still need to get around to doing that.
Kevin,
And
I can't fix stupid. I try,
I know you do your best. You do your
it's
best.
so hard, man. So hard.
But it's funny because this book actually that you just mentioned plays really well off of my next suggestion, which is Mastery by Robert Greene.
Yep.
Now, Robert Greene is a really good social media follow, by the way, for all of you listening. He does a lot of interviews, and I mean, it's like if you ever just want to like drop in like 90 seconds of pure gold and just brilliance, Robert Greene is really great to just have around on your Instagram feed. This book, Mastery, as I was looking at it, this was one that I actually read a while back. I would probably say somewhere between 7 and 8 years ago, and would need to revisit. But to your point about why would we do some of these silly things that don't make sense on paper, it's sort of a book about finding your unique purpose and what is it that you have done and what are the skills that you have acquired over your unique experience that allow you to flourish, as an individual and as a professional in this field. And so it's a list, I think, of like 6 or so rules to follow. But again, the most important rule number one is identifying what that purpose is. And so this is a great thing for people who are going into their 20s, late teenagers, but you can really kind of start, I guess, whenever theoretically, identifying that purpose. And then it talks about the importance of apprenticeship, finding someone who has done near what you are trying to accomplish and having someone that is reputable, that can be trusted, but that has also suffered, and is, of course, suffered their own failures that you can then learn so that you don't have to go back and repeat history. And so those are some of the big topics from that. This again is a book that I need to go back and revisit. And he has a series of books also that I want to say it's like I think it's like The Art of Seduction or something like that. I don't want to misspeak, but he had, and like not seduction specifically in the romantic sense, but just in like the overall arching term. He has an entire series of books that are sort of related to and interconnected, and Mastery is just one of those books. But again, I can't recommend that enough. I think that's a good read.
That's great. Yeah. I have Master on my shelf and I read it probably, probably 8 or 10 years ago. That's a reread for me as well. We're getting towards the end of this list here, so I think my last two are my near and dears. I've saved the best for last. I want to talk about The Creative Act. So The Creative Act is the most expensive book on my list. I think it's $25. This is by Rick Rubin. And if you don't know who Rick Rubin is, Rick Rubin started Def Jam Records. And this was in the early 2000s. He was the producer that helped launch the Beastie Boys, Public Enemy, LL Cool J, Kesha, Adele, Lady Gaga, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Rage Against the Machine, Aerosmith, Audio
System of a Down.
Down, Slipknot, Avett Brothers. I mean, I've hit all the big ones. Oh, and Metallica. Yeah, so very wide swath. His gift is being able to speak about creativity in a way that allows you to freely access yourself. He's a weird dude. And you've probably seen him on social media. He's a huge white beard, kind of looks like Father Christmas. This book is not a book. It is like 10,000 hours of audio transcripts that he made that were then he went through and formed into a book. And they are short thoughts. It is basically like reading 300 short stories that are nonfiction. But
Mm-hmm.
if you go 3 pages a day through this thing with a pen and you take notes in the book next to his text, in a year, you will have the most valuable little journal for how to get places in your creative process that you have ever found. This is my personal Bible. My copy of Rick Rubin's The Creative Act is as close as a religion as I get, and it's weird. There's some stuff in there that is a little trippy dippy, but I prescribe to all of it. Like I'm comfortable hanging my coat on this rack. I can't recommend it enough. It is, if you are a very literalist person, this will be a challenge for you. If you are not a literalist person and you maybe are someone that has a decent amount of like personal faith, if you're religious, this will not be a hard challenge for you. You can find avenues to access this personally. And if you're someone that's open-minded and hasn't really read something like this is a very good place to start. I recommend you pretend that you are reading poetry. Pretend you are reading a poetry book from the early 1930s, a modernist poetry book, something T.S. Eliot, F. Scott Fitzgerald, that time period. And you will have no trouble getting through it. It is written for everybody to understand. You just have to commit to doing the book. You have to commit to having a pen next to you, and you have to be patient. I don't recommend like a normal book where you read for an hour. I would go in small chunks. But it is, there are people that are deeply religious, that are Christian or Jewish, and they do Torah or Bible study, and they work through small chunks. That is how I treat this book, and I recommend it.
Yeah, it definitely is one to be chunked over time. I will say it's funny because I'm at the crossroads where you talked about being a literalist and being, a person of faith. And the literalist has won out in this experience for me so far, to where I found
you didn't
it.
get a lot out of this one?
It's not that I didn't get a lot out of it. It's that I started reading it at a time where I just didn't have the bandwidth to sit down and allow myself to explore it more. So I have it, and I want to go back and read it because I see the importance behind it. And also, as an aside, Rick Rubin's another good social media follow. That's another guy that you want to hear his thoughts as much as possible when you're scrolling around. I like his how he talked about, like, he did like a transcendental meditation like on a cross-country flight. Like, I don't know, it's crazy.
Yeah,
The
no,
dude is
he's
trippy.
a weird dude, and it is 100% clear that he is not a guy that does a lot of drugs. He's not a guy that messes like this. Is
No,
just how he lives, and it's
yeah,
an authenticity factor that kind of shocks you. I tell you what, Kevin, when you're ready to redo this one, I will lend you my copy with all my notes in it. Read that
yeah.
copy because I have done a lot of the legwork in the book already. I'm on my third read. Every time I do a read, I switch colors of pen. So I have different, like, I can see my
Nice.
process. So you can
That's cool.
borrow my copy.
All right, nice,
It
excellent.
might help you out. We
Uh,
got
so well, actually, this is the only book that I put that's like actually like this is brass playing. And this is, we're going to talk about The Art of Horn Playing. I thought earlier I'd said, Alex, that it was The Art of Brass Playing. It was specifically The Art of Horn Playing by Philip Farkas. And Farkas was a world-class horn player in the middle of the 20th century. And according to his bio, actually, which I'm sure is true, he played with Boston and Cleveland, but he's most famously known for having played with the Chicago Symphony. This is a great book for understanding the anatomy of great embouchure and the pitfalls that commonly befall students. Okay. I read this book my senior year of my undergraduate degree, and I was charged with reading this book because I was a performance major. And since I wasn't a music ed major, Dr. McCain, and I was taking a pedagogy course with him, and that's one of the books I had to read. And it was incredibly important for just my basic understanding of how things worked. And the anatomical happenings of the embouchure, which it was really groundbreaking in that way. And that's not to say, and I have, again, so I haven't read it in over 10 years. However, it's not that we have to agree with everything that he says, because I know there's a couple things in the book in hindsight, and I can't name them right off the bat, that I didn't necessarily coincide with my pedagogy today. However, it was incredibly important for me at that point, as someone who was coming out of a year-long struggle with Valsalva issues. It was incredibly important to help me realize that the lips are reactionary to the air. And even though I kind of I understood that, but it helped me understand how to get the air past my lips, quite literally, and unlock me. And it was just really important for me in that moment. And there's like this experiment that he ran with these giant synthetic lips where he just like threw air at them and then they buzzed. And that was sort of the visual that I needed to help kind of add another layer to that healing process, if you will, of that problem that so many of us deal with at some point. And so I think that's a good read, especially for performance majors. If you're not in a music ed format and you just want to continue to gather knowledge about embouchure and stuff like that, I think that's really important.
Nice. Yeah, the Farkas book sits on my shelf. That's a study book for me.
Oh
But
yeah, I mean it's not a sexy read at all. It's not what you crack up on a Friday night with a glass of wine, but it's all right. All right, so
top picks.
we are moving into, is this method books?
Nope, we got one more
Or
book.
oh, sorry, my
And I
bad.
would
My
I
bad.
would be I would be remiss if I didn't drop my top pick. This is my crown jewel on my shelf. David Bales and Ted Orland's breakthrough book, Art and Fear. This is my crossroads book because in my spare time when I'm not playing trombone, I paint. And a lot of my pedagogy comes from fused concepts from the visual art world because my mother's a painter, my grandmother's a painter. That's the lineage I come from. It's not music, it's visual art. This book I make every student buy, not optional. It's $18 on Amazon. It's a short read, 150 pages. Dave Bales and Ted Orland are both artists and art professors teaching MFAs at different schools. They are college buddies, and the entire book is about the concept of being terrified to put your art out into the world. And it's written from a perspective where you do not have to be a visual artist, you just have to be someone that makes art, which they define as anybody, basically. And the entire book is written in prose. It's not written in a self-help style. It's literally narrated by the two of them. And oh gosh, Kevin, this is the best book I've ever read. It's not even close. Like this is the slam dunk in the pile. And Ted and David argue with you in this book. And you read it, and as you read it, your brain goes, yeah, but that's BS. I don't know if I could do that. And then literally the next line will be like, we know you're thinking this is BS. Here's why it's not. And
Yeah.
you are slowly litigated out of hating yourself and out of hating your art and out of thinking you're not good enough. And then you finish the book saying, oh my God, I can totally do this. And I've never found another book that does that. It is like there are two lawyers that are fighting you to believe in yourself. And for this reason, this book gets a special place on the shelf. Read this book. I like it. This book is the one. If there's one for me, this is it.
I'm sold. I don't have enough argument in my life, so might
I've
as well
always
have some
believed
more.
that about you, actually. So that works well.
This can add to that. Well, fantastic. So there you have it with some really great suggestions in terms of like just literature, self-help, some pedagogical, some philosophical things to consider and hopefully add to your library at not too much of a cost.
Yeah.
And as we move into the next portion, we're going to talk about method books. And
Going to go pretty quick through this because we know you guys probably have heard of most of these, but these are just our top picks. You want me to kick this one off, Kevin?
yes, and I'll actually put in, I wouldn't necessarily even call this my top picks. These are just books that I'm liking right now. And, there's this, I'm not going to mention the staples. We did a whole thing on Arbans and such, but these are books that I do think every student should consider and definitely should own. So, yeah, but we'll sort of almost lightning round a little bit of this. So why
Yeah.
don't you kick it off?
So everyone's heard of the Roshu book, but smaller, equally important is Yaroslav Chimera's 55 phrasing studies. There's actually 60 of them. These are short. They are designed to teach you how to breathe in a lyrical section of playing, but they also teach you a lot about phrasing. They're really wonderful. They're like the Roshu book, but Chimera is from Eastern Europe, and as a result, they have really interesting harmonies and melodies built into the lines. Highly recommend you get this book, play along. If you want to know how they sound, go to Steve Lang's Instagram and he has recorded all of them and just listen to the way he plays.
Yeah, that was something I actually did for like I think a year straight when I was warming up, is I would just pop on Steve's recording and play with it.
So
And
good. Oh my God.
I was really glad that he did that. My first book is a book from the Brad Edwards multiverse, Patterns and Snippets. And this book is a stalwart because I think it provides creative ways for students to work in different keys and practice scales that sort of encourages in my experience, a bit of an like an oral connection if you practice it in a certain way. And I haven't gone through the entire length of this book. I kind of stay towards the front end, and I've taken some of the simpler parts of this book and incorporated it into my daily practice. Just diatonic scale patterns that are not terribly difficult. When I'm doing some of my earlier playing in the day, that's, all glist, flow studies, buzz, range connection. This is what I, take and transpose through all the keys going up and down as far as I can comfortably. And so I would recommend, we talked about moving through the Rick Rubin book really slowly. If you're really interested in getting through the depths of this book, I think it also needs to be done at a very slow pace so that you actually absorb some of that stuff. Because there's so much of it that I think that if you just kind of read through it, I don't really think you're getting a whole lot out of it. So take it slow, but Patterns and Snippets complements a lot of some of the other stuff that he's done. I think it's a good book.
Nice. Okay, I'll stay in the Bradverse here. Of all the Brad Edwards books, which there are many, the single best one, in my opinion, the one I like the most, is the Lipsler Melodies book. Everyone's played out of the Lipsler book. It's really great for development. The Lipsler Melodies book is really good because you don't actually have to think to start playing it. There's no freeze point. You can just jump in. And that's
Mhm.
important if you're ever having a day where you know you need to practice and you want to make some music, you just don't really have the emotional energy to start something or you're not sure where to begin. You can open up to any page of Lipsler Melodies. You can begin playing and you can just keep reading. And you're making music immediately and you're working on your technique immediately and you're maybe not even aware of it. It's unique in this way, and I really love it.
Yeah, that's good. Chimera is another that Chimera does that too. I think that's a great book for just kind of jumping in. As we're moving along, I'm looking at the 24 Studies for Bass Trombone or Trombone with F Attachment by Boris Grigoriev. And I got amped just looking at this book, re-looking at this book yesterday as I was getting ready to select it. It's great because he truly was considerate to a trombone with an F attachment. Sometimes in these books, they'll say that, and then there's just a bunch of alternating C's and B's. And you're going, this doesn't really work at all. And this is discouraging. This book is written with that in mind. It really has some beautiful melodic ideas, great technical etudes as well. And it is very approachable if you have the patience to do that. And I almost put also, if you're a bass trombonist who's really go get them, the 78 etudes for tuba by Grigoriev are also a great consideration. You can pick that up. Which one is that? One's on Amazon. You can find that one on Amazon.
Yeah, those are total staples in the low world. I'll jump into the low world as well for tenors that would like to kind of work in their trigger range and maybe develop their ability to teach bass trombone and play in the bass range. There is nothing that comes close for me to the Bloom book. If you don't have the Bloom etudes, these are not super low. They start, at the bottom of the staff and they work in that range, and I think they're absolutely awesome. Could not recommend enough.
Excellent. Yeah, the tenor Bloom book is actually behind me right now, and I was looking at I considered that, so I'm glad that you brought that
Yeah,
one
it's
up.
a personal favorite of mine because I've always been so scared of working into my low range, and this makes it approachable and reasonable, and you don't think about it, and suddenly you're getting better. I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that's fantastic. So the next book, Alex, I think you've heard of it. I think you might have even had a hand in writing it. You wrote it. You wrote the
Oh
book.
boy.
It's the Alto Native Method book by Alex Knutrid himself. And this was a book that when I first moved into Boston in 2021, and I was getting ready for my first round of placement auditions, I had played alto trombone. I had performed alto trombone. I'd played the Wagenseil and I'd played another piece by Wagenseil and played Brahms and all that kind of stuff. But I was like a little bit still insecure. And Alex is like, "Why are you not playing the alto cut for the audition? You chicken." And so I was like, "I don't know." I was like, "I just don't feel comfortable playing alto." And then he's like, "You need to get my book." And so I got the book. It's an incredibly comprehensive book for learning alto in a methodical way. And I can't say enough about how it just helped me switch into the mindset of making it a different instrument, which is important. And we'll talk about that in our alto episode one day. But I can't say enough about what that book did for me specifically. For I would say 2 years straight, I played it every single day, especially day 4 out of the jail routine is my favorite. That's the one right there. If you want to warm up for alto, just do day 4, like one, start from the beginning. But once you're proficient, day 4, that's going to kick your butt every day. It doesn't matter. So
Yeah. I'm touched that you think it's so great. I I worked very hard on that book, and I wanted it to be viable and tenable in a space where there aren't a lot of, access
I was
methods.
gonna say it fills a gap. I mean, that's just not something that there's so many times in on the trombone methods forum or whatever the Facebook thing where they're like, "How do I learn alto?" And it's like, there's a book for that.
Yeah,
So, and there all always wasn't. So
I feel very strange standing there and saying, "You'll just get my book," but it's really good. And
it's
like,
helpful.
there aren't a lot of really good alto methods that are concise and built to help you learn. There are a
Yeah.
lot that are built to get you to be able to get through rep. There are not a lot that build your skill. And that's why
Definitely.
I did it.
Yeah.
Cool. My fourth pick, TELP, the Trombone Exercise Library Project by Elon Morgenstern. This book is really cool. I Elon's an interesting thinker when it comes to trombone. He has some very strong opinions about things that are not always shared in the trombone world, and he's decisively one of the best bass trombonists alive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Elon wrote TELP partially because he does not like the Arpins book. And he doesn't like the Arpins book because of the lack of key diversity. And so what's really cool about TELP is that it gets you playing in all 12 keys. And it gets you playing patterns in all 12 keys, and you have accompaniment tracks to play along with. And it takes you into places where you're slightly uncomfortable that really kind of push your boundaries. You'll improve very fast playing out of this resource. And I cannot recommend it enough.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good one. My fourth pick for this is the Breathing Book by David Vining.
Mhm.
And I kind of described this book if body mapping was incorporated into a trombone method book. It's exceptionally thought-provoking for trombonists and helping them be aware of where tension is creeping up as they play and how to more comfortably allow for a flow of air to go through the trombone. And so I think I mentioned earlier, gosh, I'm already slipping on this, talking about how, oh, the Farkas and how it helped me with Valsalva. This was another thing that helped me with the Valsalva issues was David Vining's book. And a lot of his pedagogy kind of has that in mind, keeping us unlocked, so to speak. And it's an interesting book because there's a lot of anatomical charts on there and graphs, and then also the notation he uses to kind of help work you through the book. I think it's a good work through and then occasional check in every so often if you start to feel certain habits creep up that you don't like. So on Mountain Peak Music, you can find that book, which I think is like his website. So
Totally. My last grab is the Slama book. The Slama Etude, 60 Studies, I think it's called. Really wonderful. This is a book that was popular in the 70s and the 80s. It has kind of fallen out of focus because it does something that everything else does, which is just, basic rudimentary etudes. I think of this as if Chimera is to the Rochus, this is to Koprash. They are
mm,
simpler articulated studies that are really scalar and really basic. And look, you could do that without this book. Totally. I concede that point. The joy of Slama is that when you open the physical book or on your iPad and you put it on your stand, it does something to your brain that puts you into this place where you're playing an etude, so you take it really seriously, but it's super simple scale patterns. And when you approach things with this like kind of intersection of mental states, you are apt to really focus on your slide technique or your valve technique or your speed of air or your relaxed tongue, your ability to clone every note and make them even. This gets you to a place where you're really working on that in a special mind state because you think you're playing an etude. I I don't hear this book talked about a lot anymore, but I specifically have suggested it to a few students, and I have friends that have started playing out of it, and I have seen huge improvements from all of them once they're working out of this book. So I think it deserves some attention.
yeah, no, that's what this is all about, right?
Your
I'll
last pick, what
finish
do you got?
I'll finish up with the 40 Progressive Studies by Tyrell.
Yeah.
And this is another book. I came back across this book within the last year because I heard someone post something on Instagram that just sounded like $1 zillion playing out of this book. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I think I have that somewhere. And so I dug it up and was looking at it. And essentially, it's like for those of you that are familiar with the Voxman book, in my very subjective opinion, it's like if you took Voxman etudes and you just made them better. I don't know. Maybe it is the Allstate Texas in me process that just hates the Voxman book now, but I hate the Voxman book. And so this is it's a great alternative to those. It's hard. in my opinion. It's a really, if you can play the things out of this book well, then you can freaking play the trombone lights out. And so, pick one and make it almost like a solo study that you're going to work on, and make it sort of a daily bread for a while. And I think that you'll find some benefits from that, but you won't hate doing it. Like it's fun and it's challenging and it will kick your butt, but I don't know. I've just had a really good time reading through some of that stuff. So that's my last pick.
I like that. Well, we can shift gears here. We are going to talk now about tools that you can have on your shelf that will help you in the practice room, in the growth space of your life. These are just physical objects that we have found worth illuminating and, bringing to your thoughts. So I can kick this one off. I'm an analog guy. I like digital tools. They're useful. A lot of my teachers have been big tech people. Toby and Steve, like kings amongst that. But I am a strong proponent of physical objects that are not digital, because they unlock a different setting on your brain. And to that end, I have a traditional egg timer that is like a 45-minute kitchen egg timer that you twist and it spins and then eventually it beeps. And I have a 5-minute board game hourglass timer. And I use both in my practice all the time. When I'm struggling with a specific measure, I will flip the hourglass timer and I will work on it slowly for 5 minutes. I time all of my segments of my practice with the kitchen timer. I time the lessons I teach with the kitchen timer. I will use the 5-minute timer at the beginning to give 5 minutes of check-in time, and then I will run the 45-minute timer afterward. I'll run it in segments. This really helps my brain. And I think that having something physical that you can't cheat might help you too.
That's cool. That's really cool. That's the physical sand timer. That's like some Marcus Aurelius Stoic stuff right there. Like
I
that's
make
like
no apologies.
I love it. I love it. I'll stick with the analog. And I think we, again, with the tech age and how convenient it is, I use tonal energy. That is the metronome that I use every day. Okay. Let that be clear. However, as I was coming of age and on occasion still, I will just use my good old fashioned Korg tuner and metronome, but specifically more so for the tuner aspect. And I think that having what I've experienced with students is most of them will say, oh, I have a metronome or a tuner on my phone, but I don't feel like it gets used. Additionally, if it does get used, they have a phone on their stand, which then provides so many avenues for distraction. So I think if you have the actual physical tuner metronome, you could do much worse than just having that on your stand and using that. So it's like $30.
I'm a
I've
cord
Lord,
guy too.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I
Through
love
and
them.
through.
I love them.
Okay, my second pick is not cheap. I'm sorry. It is necessary. This goes on the list. I'm almost 6'5", and the world is not built for men of my size. It's just not. My neck always hurts from stopping at traffic lights and bending my head forward to see if it's red. I don't fit in planes. I'm constantly slouching. But all of this pales in comparison compared to the problem I have in my profession, which is that when I'm sitting in an orchestra or in a band, or when I'm practicing, the stand does not go tall enough, and I'm always bending forward. The stand that everybody uses is a Manhasset 48. You can buy them, you can steal them. We don't recommend that, obviously, but we've never done that from schools. But
Never.
you can buy a Manhasset stand for about $60, and you probably have one at your house one way or another. There is also a Manhasset called the Manhasset 48T, which is $60, and it is a Manhasset stand that goes 1.5 feet taller. That means that the lip of the stand where you rest your pencil is 6 feet in the air when fully extended. If you are a tall person, buy this stand. Do not hesitate. It is the best money you will ever spend when you are practicing, to be able to have the stand go tall enough that you don't have to slouch. It changes your posture. It changes your breathing. It makes you play 3 years better than you do instantly. And I waited 10 years to learn of this discovery, and if I had figured it out immediately, it would have changed my life in so many ways I cannot even describe. This is the best money you will ever spend if you are not a short person. Buy this stand.
That is a hell of an endorsement. I I wish that someone would look at me like the way Alex looks at that Manhasset stand. So my next one, and I don't know if this is the same for you, Alex, it may or may not be. This is where we're getting into the more expensive territory. My next one is the Brick. Now, the Brick is, for those of us that just don't have the discipline, and some of you hopefully do, to have the discipline to say, you know what, I'm not going to open social media during my practice. I'm not talking to you nerds that can so easily just
Think you're
focus.
better than us? You probably are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. You're probably doing way better than I am. But the brick for me is you can get it at, I think it's getbrick.app, but just Google it, the brick. And for $50, it's a device that you can essentially use your sort of phone tap and then block out different applications. And the way it works is you actually only get to keep a couple, you select what you get to keep. So for me, I have a setting where I get to keep obviously my phone, but I also keep my metronome, my tuner, my recording device that's on my phone. But other than that, everything else is locked out. And if I want to unlock it, I have to walk back. It's magnetic, which is cool. So it stays on my fridge. And I have to walk all the way like a loser and untap it and tell myself and lie to myself that I'm being productive when I do
You have to
that.
walk of shame to get onto social media.
Exactly. And so that has helped me so much more than just the standard time reminder settings on the phone. And I wish I didn't need that, but sometimes I do. I mean, and sometimes one of my defaults of being tired is that I'm unfocused. And so when I'm unfocused, I just scroll like an idiot. And this helps me not do that. So
This feels like it would be useful. I like it.
yeah, big time.
Okay, my second pick is a whiteboard. I think you should have a whiteboard in your practice room. I think it should be big. I think it should be at least 2 feet by 3 feet. I think it should be on your wall, and I think you should be able to write stuff on it constantly. I think it's incredibly important to have a physical workspace where you can put your ideas out, that you can find them in the morning after you've slept. I cannot recommend this strongly enough. Having a place where you can put concepts you're working on and look at them to reimagine, whether they're drawings or they're words or they're sentences or they're quotes, it's really helpful. It's also a place where you can organize, your thoughts as you practice. If you're wanting to make amendments to your practice journal, you can put them up on the whiteboard. It's just useful. It's a physical space to manifest what your brain is doing at the subconscious level. Can't recommend it enough.
That's fantastic. I kind of think of that meme of that guy that's explaining something behind the whiteboard. He looks kind of crazy, but
oh yeah.
But it's important. I totally understand that for myself, who is a visual person, that is an absolute necessity. I'm actually gonna kind of close my end of this. I will make a quick aside at the very end of one other thing, and it's going to be very brief. But the other thing is now more expensive yet. It's about if you go with a Whoop. So I'm going to talk about essentially these devices that you wear on your wrist that serve as heart monitors and different sort of vital signs organizers, can gauge when you're sleeping, gauge what your sleep is like, etc., blood oxygen level, all that sort of stuff. I have a Whoop. It's actually a subscription-based thing, and it's $240 a year. I will say I'm not sure I'm going to continue after my first year, because there's also a Garmin that you can wear on your arm or wear on your wrist that is a one-time purchase. And the thing I like about the Garmin in my early research of this is that it also has a watch interface. You can see what the weather's like. Some possible more distractions. The Whoop there's nothing on the Whoop except a band. And so there's nothing to look at, which means you're never distracted. But I like that the Garmin is a one-time purchase. But I think it's important. When I go into performance, I can actually set the Whoop to know that I'm in performance, and I can look back and see how my body was reacting throughout that time. And so that's really nice. It kind of gives me a gauge for how I'm feeling. It measures heart rate variability, which is a really important stat. So I think that's an important thing to take a look at, just to be more aware of how we are from a health perspective. The last thing that I'll just throw in really quick in under 10 seconds is journaling, and just getting a written journal. You can buy them in bulk on Amazon. You need to be writing down and knowing what it is that you're doing at all times. I think that's important in your journey. So that's my little bit there.
Totally. Yeah. And Whoop is headquartered at Boston University.
It is. Yeah. Crazy enough, I passed it for a long time and then I got one, and then I was like, oh, I've been looking at this. It was subconscious marketing the whole freaking time.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge burgeoning industry. I'm seeing a lot of musicians wearing them now. I was on a gig last night, and the guy I was sitting next to had one on. Okay, so here's my big pick. This is a breath builder. This is a big part of Toby's pedagogy. This was a game changer for me. I still use it every day. This helps me loosen my tongue up. It helps me make sure I'm using enough air when I'm tonguing things fast. Helps me make sure that I'm cycling my air at the correct speed and that it is leaving my mouth fast enough, not speeding up as I start the buzz. Final grabs, have a mirror on your stand. Small mirror. You can get a titanium mirror for $15 on Amazon. It'll be about this big. Have it. It's totally worth it to be able to do the work. You need to see what's going on. We just do.
Yeah.
The rim, mouthpiece rim, is another piece of my pedagogy that I got from Toby. I think he invented most of the rim pedagogy that I teach. It's really great. It's really helpful, but it's a little more complicated than I can go into in the time we have left. Finally, I like Velcro. I buy Velcro squares and I put them on my music stand and on my chord tuner and on pencils so that I can have everything stuck in one place. It's a really helpful thing to just be able to organize your practice space super simply. You will use a tuner if you don't have to look for it. If it is stuck to your stand, you'll use it. If you have a pencil stuck to your stand, you'll use it. If you have a mirror stuck to your stand, you will use it. If you have to search for these things, even if you just have to pull them out from the shelf, you will not use them as much. It makes a difference to have it on hand and immediately.
That's cool. I never considered that. So I'll definitely look into
Yeah.
investing in that.
Dude,
Nice.
this was a
This was
speed run episode, but we did it.
Yeah, and honestly, this is one of the most fun episodes. I mean, this will be like episode 10, I suppose, close to it.
Yeah,
And
this was 10.
and it's like I don't know. I'm starting to feel more and more comfortable. And this was a really fun one to research and talk about. So
We did it.
I hope those that listen to it, I hope you really, really enjoyed it and got some things out of it. And let us know. Let us know. And Manhasset, sponsor us if you don't mind. If you don't mind. All right. Well, until next time, y'all. Enjoy the fall, enjoy everything, and we'll talk to you soon.
Happy trails, everyone, and happy practicing.